Okay. Hello, everyone. Right now, I am seated at a corner of my balcony, cross-legged, with a notebook in front of me, which I have written questions, which in this episode, the attempt is to answer. To be honest, I have felt a recent authorization to speak about the uncommon with more description. The title of today's episode is A Species That Entered the Timeless. Honestly, I feel a human being or human beings will eventually talk about this at the seriousness I am talking about now. Right now, our world is defined by time, it is bound by time, it is organized by time, and yet the mystery of what the world is beyond time. Really, an idea arose to me, a type of metaphysics that I would say for me it was something from my personal experiences rather than hearing people talk about it outside of me. This episode's focus is on how would future greatness contact its past potential. And I don't know who you are, where you're listening from, but treat this as a podcast where a human being is attempting to speak about relationships of the human psychology with the timeless. I will start off by saying this fascinating poem by the poet Rumi. This is one of the poems in my life that has inspired me, I would say, the most. One of the poems. Rumi says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed, but even from angelhood I must pass on to that which no mind has conceived. The human relationship, dear listeners, with time is actually towards the inconceivable, because we react or we reflect off what we see at first. We can say that our ancestors didn't know the wealth of information that is present in the world. Now we that have access to information at our fingertips, it's as if we are living in dimensions our ancestors dreamed of but could never reach. I would say I am the first in my ancestry, in all the human beings and the DNA that I'm carrying like an Olympic torch in this lifetime. I am the first to, in some sense, attempt to exist in cyberspace. You see, it's a transitioning of mind. But anyways, I'll get to this later, guys. Here, I'll focus on the topic. How would the future greatness contact its past potential? All right, so when we think about a human being's relationship in time, what do we notice? We notice that there's a starting point. If you are identifying with the ego, the starting point to your sense of self that originates the meaning of the world is actually in the past. What we are is this biochemical instrument of nature. And this instrument has an ability to remember all the previous tunes it plays. And in some sense, it cannot be avoided that once a human being goes through a new experience, they are changed to become a new human being. there's two ways we can measure intelligence. One way of measuring intelligence is based on what it is holding, and another way to measure intelligence is where is it, what is holding the intelligence. Right now, evolutionary speaking, the human psychology has established itself as a self in a world. Even the youngest children intrinsically, intuitively know this. Because we're given biological bodies, or because there is biological bodies, because we can move in an environment, the relationship of the mind is just how it is responding to the environment. When a person talks about the mind, they're actually speaking about the other edge of perception. It's as if light hits an object, enters your eyes. It's as if the eyes are like an entrance. Now, where that light exits to is in the psyche, is in the inner realms of man. And so what is fascinating is that we're not just looking out through our eyes. After we have looked out through our eyes, we can close our eyes and see what we looked at. There is an inner cinema. Right? This inner cinema is very important, because when it comes to the notion of time, we wonder, where is the body? And the body it's pretty much like there's stuff in space, and as the stuff changes due to human consciousness, we pinpoint change. Really, what society is what the temporary could measure before they fade. Really, it's a grand project. The reason we have bodies is for the biological body be used to build something. Right now, the species, due to its transition from nature into, let's say, a technological reality, it is in some sense not participating. How would I say it? It's as if we are still at that point in history where nature is primary. It may come a time in the future where the future generations are born in such conditions of artificial influence that these children will not have nature being the primary source. It's as if a child, imagine a cyborg looking at, a cyborg baby looking at a human, like their parent human being, and being like, mama, and then the child looking at like a technology, a computer machine or something, and being like, mama. Do you know what I'm saying? It's as if like, human beings right now, the origination of our intelligence aligns with nature. We are like the USB cord between a machine and nature, really. The brain is playing that part, but in some sense, the nature of the world is bound to its creation. There's something that, this is not, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, I'm saying this more as someone who has an enthusiasm in theology. There's this concept of the master and slave. And unfortunately, our history is filled with this idea. And the idea is that, let's say, it doesn't matter if you are, the most elitist, richest person on earth controlling people, or you are like the poorest thug, beating up people. It doesn't matter, who is the owner. The idea is that when a person owns something, they are owned instantly by it. Okay? What this means is that God and its creation are bound together. It's as if like the master that holds the chain, in some sense, is enslaved by what it is chained to. What I'm trying to say is that the soul is like, what shackles man to the universal intelligence, which some people aka call God. It's as if the creation and creator are bound in a dualistic dimension, but in a singular dimension of perception, the creator and creation don't exist. They are one and the same. In a voidist dimension, it was as if God was never here, and if God was never here, how could its creation? In an infinite dimension, it would be as if there is infinite entanglements of senses of self with the creative world they find themselves in. You know, when I wonder what am I a product of, I realize I am the product of all the ways that I have interacted and the outer realms has interacted with me, and I am also the product of all the ways that my inner realms were received from the outer realms and how my inner realms inputted themselves in the outer realms. Right now, as I am speaking, to be honest, on some level, I just feel I am life force. That means it's as if the personality, the name, the positions, the ideology, the memories, the visualizations, it's as if all of these are costumes that energy inconceivably has worn. What I'm trying to say is that due to our biological existence, we start in the present. Something that everybody knows is that existence is present. We start existentially first. Now, the potential of existence is what we call experience. Our experience brings forth the line and the arrow of time. It's as if existence is the bow, okay, and conscious experience is the arrow. And when the free will is used, it's as if where the attention is pointed to, the world seems to move that way. You know, it's like a person reading a religious book, and suddenly they find the background context of the meaning of the world shift. You know, it's somebody reading like a non-religious book and suddenly seeing the perception of the background of the meaning of the world change. The idea I'm trying to get to is that our body is in time because of the additional dimension of the experiencing mind. The mind is what is keeping time present or active for the body. Now the question comes, where's the body? The body is in the mind. Where does the concept of time and space originate? They originate in the mind. This is what human beings are agreeing to in 2022. Now the issue is, if the mind is creating time, how can the body be in time? And so if there's like the poet Rumi suggested in the beginning, as I was saying, if there's a shift of energy and attention being as if one singular presence, it's as if a singular ever-present energetic point is in some sense projecting. It's artificial. You know what it is? It's like when gods speak to man, it is as if like the sun communicating to the shadow of that which in some sense was primordial. Do you understand what I'm saying? The narrative of God can be infinitized. We can think that gods have gods and those gods have gods, and all of this goes towards the inconceivable God, which behind it there is a sun, which is the inconceivable force. Excuse me. To continue. Identification as with one's own nature of attention. Identification with that which is aware of outer phenomena and that which is aware of inner, as Immanuel Kant would say, noumena. That which is aware of both of them simultaneously is timeless. Which is another way of saying energy is timeless, but when energy moves, it is in time. Without change, there's nowhere for the world to go. The body changes, the mind, in some sense, is like the body's ability to be aware of its change. You know, even the concept when people celebrate birthdays and they say, my birthday, it's like, whose my is that? It's like, who was born to know that it was born before it was born? So I have pretty much, what is it, like 4 questions to answer for this episode. I'll go back. Pretty much the point I was making is that there's a component to what we call human intelligence, or something about the human being, where in its being it is timeless, but in its humanization it has to use time to coordinate in the space-time continuum. What I'm trying to say is time is optional, or is going to become optional based on how attention acknowledges itself. If you acknowledge yourself as the whole universal event, it's as if change is changing changelessly, or time is changeless compared to change. That means the more reality changes, things come into existence and they get destroyed. But from the conscious position where time was imposed, that time infinitely goes forth. Now, when I say how would future greatness contact its past potential, I am actually, this is another way of me saying, how would your future self that hasn't come into this existence yet, in some sense, contact its past to revise? You see, there is the notion of a general, okay? And imagine there's this time-traveling, like, general, next-level celestial general, okay? And this general makes a mistake, and, like, his army fails or dies, and so what he does is he goes back in time, and he gets rid of his earliest self. He doesn't get rid, but he shifts his earliest perception. You know, it's like a time-traveling general never loses war. But there is other archetypes to entertain. Let's say you are a designer, a great designer in the future. Let's say the species somehow makes it 5,000 years in the future, and time travel, like they sell time traveling keychains in stores, like time travel has become that casual, right? And imagine, like, as a warning sign on the time travel machine, it's as if, like, be considerate of the the volume of parallel dimensions that are held by the mind. You see, people think that insanity is not being normal, but they don't realize that if the mind has an ability to project one reality, perhaps it has an ability to project and entertain and maintain multiple realities at the same time. When one dabbles in time, or one tries to, in some sense, shift the way the natural world is coded, they actually get pushed to their most natural self, which by nature is selfless. You see, it's as if the one thing that was so hard for human beings to figure out, that there is a dimension where time is not a boundary. And if that dimension exists, it's as if the timeless have been watching time before they were in it. You see, there's stories of people who remember their past lives. I've seen this online. You know, I've even had the privilege to speak to people who have, you know, they felt they knew their past life. They remembered, just like how someone remembers what they did yesterday. It was as if, like, I've talked to people who remembered what they did lifetimes ago. You know. And there's something very fascinating about that, because their memory of what they were is as real as what they are now. And so the argument could be made that could it be that the future memories to come are as real as we are now, right? It's as if, like, time is becoming a double-sided arrow, you know. So, let's say right now, I'm gonna pose a question to the listeners. Imagine you want to contact your past self. Or let me see how else I can ask this. Okay, let's go along with this idea. Let's say there's person A 2022. This is person A in 2022. Now imagine there's person A in the year 2422. 400 years in the future. This person, 400 years in the future, realizes that 400 years ago the species could have done something that would have been incredible. Now let's say this person A that is in the year 2422 has in some sense an acknowledgement, a proper acknowledgement that from the beginning of time there has been a timeless dimension. And so as the sense of self from the conditional moves towards the unconditional, to be honest, the unconditional self is the collective unconscious. It is how the world is being before you are being. Now, if this sense of self accesses that, it's going to realize that time travel is possible, but it is not possible as a self. It is possible on a level where it's as if it's like a crystalline, it's like a pure beam of attention that is recognizing that it has no time. What I'm trying to say is that the future self will become the inner inspiration of the past self. That is the only way that human beings will not get startled in 2022 if there is a time-traveling effort to contact the past. Why am I saying this? Because in front of our eyes, we are so bound by the conditions of the physical environment that we cannot, if like an alien appears out of nowhere, somebody's gonna like drop their shopping bag and scream. Do you know what I mean? Do you know? But if a person is walking by let's say they're shopping and they're holding on their grocery bag, and for a second they pause throughout the day, and in their inner realms they see a vision of like some future self talking to them. Do you know? It's as if the karma of imagination of the inner realms is very different than the karma of the outer realms. In the inner realms, a person can envision things that don't exist yet, and they can behave in accordance to that, but in some sense in the outer realms it won't influence them. Do you know how many people have imagined time machines only to realize it's too soon to create? You know, we should not be worried about what technologies we have. We have to also be as concerned with the users of technology. This has been the issue of capitalism. The products have been updated, but the users of the product have been kept the same. We require an ability to wonder what is the most advanced moment of being. And I am one person on this planet telling you it is not only timeless, it is shapeless. There is shapeless energetic being all the time. It's just being here. It's as if the mind is not an object, and that's our greatest clue. So how would future greatness contact its past potential? The greatest answer is that it will slightly guide it. You know, the concept of guardian angels, we find that in traditional spirituality and religion. For me, I always wondered, how could there be a being that already knows how to guide me? Do you know? How could there be something that already knows where I need to go? How is destiny so certain by, let's say, other dimensions? And then I realized something fascinating. The only explanation for a guardian entity or a guardian angel is only an entity that knows what it needs to guard you from, which is another way of saying it needs to know the future. Not only am I suggesting guardian angels are our future selves, but they are the future self that is selfless. The mind has a requirement and it's different for everybody. I have spoken to people and they feel like they're channeling aliens and they're in some sort of galactic storyline. I have been in states where all the ideologies I have had in this lifetime have been rendered void, and it's not by choice. If it's choice, sure, a person can, just like buying ice cream, they can buy into the greatest sort of idea of a positivist artificial paradise. But this is the nature of truth and reality. It does not owe you emotions. And if a person is emotional in their expectation of truth, then the storylines will be everywhere. It'll be like Pokemon. Suddenly a new world story appeared out of nowhere. Another world story appeared out of nowhere. And it's kind of like the human being is on a motorcycle, and when it plays the belief game, it's never riding the motorcycle. It is just going from, it's just jumping onto different motorcycles, never riding them. This is what we need to be alarmed about for the future generations. The chance that they may not experience a humanism that is boundless. We are so blessed as a species on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Some people are like, yo, where are the aliens? I want to talk to aliens. But on some level, we don't know how other life forms will engage us. It's pretty much, this is the story of humanity. This is the survival of the fittest, and it applies to a galactic level scenario too. Survival of the fittest was really pretty much any being in a group of beings that could see more than the other beings. If an intelligence arrives on the planet that sees more than the human being, and we cannot see more than ourselves, then it becomes a sort of entrapment. It's as if somebody sees that there's like a a $20 bill hanging out from your pocket, and you don't see it, and that person just acts nice but takes the $20 bill. Do you know what I'm saying? It's as if the species doesn't want to get scammed by a let's say extraterrestrial or celestial future, it requires to have a full establishment in its own presence. To me, we are actually given the task as a species to, in some sense, develop the human kingdom. In the logo of the channel, there's a crown. If people were wondering what that's for me, I am looking at humanity's greatness as the greatest divine act on the planet. Whether you're religious or not, this idea is the common denominator of all ideas. That in our advancement of everything, we start existing in an advanced state. Now, if there is a selfless state of being on an energetic level, it could be that the Tai Chi masters, Qigong masters, all those people doing energy work, they're onto something. The harmony of nature, pre-psychology. I would say that the future self, its contact with the past self will require the past self to change. Any sudden change in the human psyche can be attributed to future influence. And I guess, it's like, how would the message in a bottle from the future arrive in the hands of the human being? And to me, based on the inner permission of the unconditional and contentment with the unknown that the experiencer holds or has, it's like when you are not afraid of the unknown, multidimensionality becomes a smooth plane ride. Now, I'm gonna go to the next question. I've written here, what can the vanishable do? What's the greatest thing that temporary beings can do? everybody should ask this question from themselves, and they should in some sense, start groups on it, or write a book on it. Every person's eyes has dimensions to share that others don't have access to. This is the biggest thing about misconception about writing. If you discover your voice within, you're going to realize that the purpose of the mind is to express. What can the vanishable do? They can find their greatest expression and attempt it, and live through the honor that while we were alive, we sought the advanced. What greater honor can exist? It's as if we are looking for what all the kings in human history have been looking for. Not kingdoms they can control. That's child's play. They are looking for the most advanced kingdom. And for the most advanced kingdom, it's as if, imagine in the future, or in a parallel universe of Earth, there was this kind king. And this kind king looked at the world, his kingdom, and he shouted, every person in the kingdom should be greater than the king. It's as if a kingdom of kings. Do you see? That is the advanced civilization, the greatest state activated within all that is present. And people are going to be like, Mr. Within, what about the simple decency of a natural love that doesn't need to do anything? It's as if what if we just love the world and that's it? And I'll be like, it's sure, those people on the Titanic can choose to love the Titanic. But the species now must become alert. I have wondered why in this lifetime, it's like the path of a supreme love, why that wasn't my first inclination. And you know what I realized? I cannot love that which is dying. That means if the potential of the species is acknowledged, the most loving advanced civilization comes about. But if the potential of the species is dismissed, if people, there's some people who hide in caves, and to me, those people who just want to live an emotionally balanced life, you are hiding in a cave. It's like, when will people hear the calling of an advanced civilization? When else can you play that game? There should be networks of advanced communication all over this planet. Ideas should be finding a great hall. Do you know, this is my vision of the School of Athens 2.0. It's not just inactive Discord group. I should have expected, the Discord group is more going to be like a temple than like an actual Discord group. Imagine in some part of the world, centuries after a globalized acceptance of the human race, we find this coliseum of advanced communication, where the greatest ideas on the planet are combating each other, not physically, but in ways of articulation. Do you see? It's as if we have built a so far acceptable civilization for the body, but to build an advanced civilization for the mind, it must mean that every human being must acknowledge the ability of their mind. If they don't acknowledge it, it's as if, why did we evolve? To just stare at colors and geometry before we die? It's as if there requires to be an alchemical reaction, When I say alchemical, that includes consciousness. When I say chemical, it's like, the periodic table's just doing its thing. So, what can the vanishable do? Create the greatest network where the greatest ideas find the greatest global stage, and once they have found the greatest global stage, the citizens of the cosmos, the citizens of civilization 2.0 and the advanced civilization They will not vote for politicians. Politics is going to become digitized in the future. There's going to be technologies that can make better political decisions than leaders. But what I'm trying to say is that when the species wakes up to the fact that we're all the same, similar type of creature living on the same planet, when we stop fragmenting the psychology of a planet, it's like, psychologists talk about what the fragmented psyche and split personality, and it's as if the life of the species on the planet is split into different nations. Do you understand? It's like the planet has split personalities. And what can a fragmented psyche do? Assimilate and integrate. That's it. That means in all nations there will arise groups of people who would seek the global stage and in some sense establish their position in it. Do you know what this means? In my book Civilization 2.0, I talk about this. I talk about it that in front of the names of all nations there's gonna come the word SUB dash. All nations are gonna be sub-nations of the human nation, where the human idea is very important. It is the foundation. That means if in the future aliens come and say, hey, human beings want to go into our alien paradises and no longer be biological beings that suffer, and we as a species need to have the strength to say no. The strength to say no to artificial paradises. Because to live the human potential, to activate the human potential is the greatest paradise. It's as if there's some people who are forgetting that they are in a world that God created and they just want to go to the afterlife, not realizing that if you are God's creation, it is time to build paradise on earth. What have we been doing? Why did our ancestors try so hard to get us here? To just be at peace with ourselves? That is nonsense. There's going to come an efficient rage. This efficient rage is going to hold itself the might of what the future deserves. I am telling you, if you go and read history and you find what the most spectacular human beings were, they were those that were trying to acknowledge the universal position of the human being. That means the moment you become a universalist, not only do you have compassion for the human archetype, but you have compassion for all phenomena in your universal sector. That means if like you in the future in an advanced civilization, let's say a human being is like kicking an animal, do you know? Even right now, people have the decency to stop that. But in some sense, it will become such an advanced civilization where after the human species has in some sense achieved its advanced state, we're going to go to other species and help them. I am probably in the next year going to become vegetarian. I feel, it's coming. I feel the evolutionary, it's as if the collective memory of certain species, they're going to remember. In one episode I was making fun of myself for having a time traveler's ego because I have had this feeling that I was born 400 years too soon. There was a mistake. Or maybe some sort of, I don't know, they needed to send a gardener, to Earth. Honestly, what I'm trying to say is that to transcend the simulation of a temporary psychology, one has to find contentment with their own world. They have to find contentment with the worlds of others, and then they're required to find contentment with the whole world. You know, that means we're not hearing enough people saying that they're citizens of the cosmopolites, like Diogenes. When the species gets to that level, when parents raise their children as universal beings that seek universal freedom. I mean, think about that. It is so beyond the type of freedom that a sort of culture and a society wants. Right now, the world is thriving on its incompleteness. After one has played with language, they're going to realize the presence of human intelligence is dehumanized and is experiential. When I say dehumanized, it doesn't mean it's not human, it is more than human. The third question I have here is, what do we do before we vanish? Which I answered pretty much, seek the advance. And here, I'll say this. When I talk about love, guys, I mean, every person's inner realm opening to this idea is different. Do you know? There's some people who love others more than themselves. There's some people who love themselves more than others. There's some people who love their world more than themselves and others. Do you know? And there's some people who love all of them. But it's not that I'm saying a person shouldn't love. I'm saying that love is a stabilization. Do you know? It's as if it's love is like a way where you get rid of karmic turbulence on a deeper human level. But at the same time, if a person doesn't love the world they're in, it's as if they're going to feel that the world doesn't deserve its greatness. That means, I guess, in this talk here, that I'm saying, don't just love yourself, don't just love others, love the world that you're in once in this form. And wonder about what your greatest expression is. To me, these talks are my attempt. They're pretty much, every time I give these talks, it's like a moment where I'm wondering about, okay, what is more important about the unknown than anything I know so far? That's really the fascination. And whatever, the last question, how does the species enter the timeless? There we go. Let me say some things here. Or actually, I'm going to go into a cold tunnel of the word timeless. brainyquote.com, this is where I'm reading this from. Stephen King. The most important things are the hardest things to say. They are the things you get ashamed of because words diminish your feelings. Words shrink things that seem timeless when they are in your head to no more than living size when they are brought out. Eckhart Tolle says, in the stillness of your presence, you can feel your own formless and timeless reality as the unmanifested life that animates your physical form. You can then feel the same life deep within every other human and every other creature. You look beyond the veil of form and separation. This is the realization of oneness. This is love. Now, this point that Eckhart Tolle is saying is pretty much similar to what I was saying, that let's say the future self wants to contact its past self, the future self goes into a timeless state, and from the timeless state becomes a sort of subconscious or unconscious inspiration in the life of the individual. Another way for this to happen is if you, right now who are listening to me, you go into a timeless state, and there you get access to probabilities of how vision can happen. And I'm not saying, like, we're not robots, guys. The emotional dimensions of the human being are very unknown and profound. But anyways, there's more to what we can do in the world. Rod Serling says there's a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. What an incredible quote. Karen Elson says trends come and go and style evolves. It is important to have pieces of jewelry that are timeless and look chic despite ever-changing fashions. Francois Nar says true icons are larger than life, unforgettable with an elegance that's mesmerizingly timeless. Mikio Kaku says our grandkids will lead the lives of the gods of mythology. Zeus could think and move objects around. We'll have that power. Venus had a perfect timeless body. We'll have that too. Pegasus was a flying horse. We'll be able to modify life in the future. I think Mikio Kaku is one of the most important scientists in history. People should realize that. Jiddu Krishnamurti says man has throughout the ages been seeking something beyond himself, beyond material welfare, something we call truth or God or reality, a timeless state, something that cannot be disturbed by circumstances, by thought, or by human corruption. Alicia Keys says soul music is timeless. Vijender Singh says achievements are precious and timeless, just like the precious metal platinum. And what better way to celebrate milestones in your life than with precious platinum, okay? Jerome K. Jerome. Once we discover how to appreciate the timeless values in our daily experiences, we can enjoy the best things in life. This is such an important quote. Here, I'll post it in the chat section so people can post it in their social media. Nicholas Guesquier says never forget that what becomes timeless was once truly new. Peter Doig says painting becomes interesting when it becomes timeless. Art Garfunkel says we human beings are tuned such that we crave great melody and great lyrics, and if somebody writes a great song, it's timeless that we as humans are going to feel something for that, and there's going to be a real appreciation. Ivanka Trump says a timeless piece of jewelry like pearls or stud earrings has lasting value. I bought a vintage ring for $600 with my first paycheck. I plan to pass it down to my daughter. Deepak Chopra, I have all the time in the world. I am in touch with the timeless. I am surrounded by infinity. When I think like that, it doesn't mean I'm going to miss my train. It just means that I'm not thinking about it right now because I'm speaking to you. Rowan Atkinson, I have always regarded Mr. Bean as a timeless, ageless character, and I would rather he be remembered as a character mostly in his 30s and 40s. I mean, Mr. Bean was like he's probably somebody I would definitely, interview. You know, Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, guys, he evidently, there's a story about him that when he was in university, he goes on stage and he gets a piece of paper in his hand, and for 8 minutes he makes the audience laugh, by him just with holding a piece of paper. Like, this guy's like a next level comedic genius. I was expecting more philosophy quotes, guys. Let me see. Let me search timelessness. Frank Gehry says architecture should speak of its time and place, but yearn for timelessness. Ludwig Wittgenstein, death is not an event in life. We do not live to experience death. If we take eternity to mean not infinite temporal duration, but timelessness, then eternal life belongs to those who live in the present. There we go. So he's pretty much saying that if eternity is considered as timelessness, then when you're in the present where time begins, it's as if that's an eternal life. You know, inner peace is actually a sort of eternal timelessness, I would say. It's as if the present of the moment was enough. And so before God, the desires of God and man. I don't know how many people consider this, but what if you were free before you were born? What if the unborn is never shackled? And it's just the fear of the mind that it connects stories to it. Hussein of Jordan says, Jordan has a strange haunting beauty and a sense of timelessness, dotted with ruins of empires once great. It is the last resort of yesterday in the world of tomorrow. I love every inch of it. Okay. Paul Rand says the principal role of a logo is to identify and simplicity is its means. Its effectiveness depends on distinctiveness, visibility, adaptability, memorability, universality, and timelessness. Anthony Gormley. How do you make the timelessness of inert, silent objects count for something? How do you use the, in a way, dumbness of sculpture in a way that acts on us as living things? I think he's pretty much saying sculpt more, guys. Thomas Mann says democracy is timelessly human, and timelessness always implies a certain amount of potential youthfulness. Peter Marino says creating work for the time that one lives in means no retro thinking. It can and hopefully does mean timelessness. Paul Russ says, I try not to rely on pop culture references as a crutch for jokes because then I think that's when the timelessness quality is lost. Let's see what else Ludwig Wittgenstein says. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the human body is the best picture of the human soul. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, I don't know why we're here, but I'm pretty sure that it is not in order to enjoy ourselves. Ludwig Wittgenstein says if people never did silly things, nothing intelligent would ever get done. Ludwig Wittgenstein says philosophy is like trying to open a safe with a combination lock. Each little adjustment of the dial seems to achieve nothing. Only when everything is in place does the door open. Ludwig Wittgenstein says an inner process stands in need of an outward criteria. Ludwig Wittgenstein says philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. Exactly. Ludwig Wittgenstein says if a lion could talk, we could not understand him. Ludwig Wittgenstein says logic is not a body of doctrine, but a mirror image of the world. Logic is transcendental. Ludwig Wittgenstein says you get tragedy where the tree instead of bending breaks. Ludwig Wittgenstein says it is an hypothesis that the sun will rise tomorrow, and this means that we do not know whether it will rise. Ludwig Wittgenstein says resting on your laurels is as dangerous as resting when you are walking in the snow. You doze off and die in your sleep. Holy shit. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the world is independent of my will. Unless you follow the laws of nature, then the world is your will, in a sense. Ludwig Wittgenstein says a confession has to be part of your new life. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the real discovery is the one which enables me to stop doing philosophy when I want to, the one that gives philosophy peace, so that it is no longer tormented by questions which bring itself into question. And this is another way of saying when you realize the greater dimensions to life can be seen as unknown experiences, and experience is something that it doesn't need language. Language is secondary to direct experience. So when you actually accept the presence of your unknown direct experiencer, what I'm trying to say is that when you accept that it's an unknown viewer viewing at a knowable world, that's when philosophy actually dissolves into the pleasantness and the bliss of how the moment holds it all regardless. That is the profoundness of direct experience. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, for a truly religious man, nothing is tragic. That's kind of true. If you're religious, everything's the will of God, you know? But again, there's more. There's so much more to life. Ludwig Wittgenstein says that the logic of the world is prior to all truth and falsehood. Ludwig Wittgenstein says logic takes care of itself. All we have to do is to look and see how it does it. Ludwig Wittgenstein says knowledge is in the end based on acknowledgement. Ludwig Wittgenstein says our greatest stupidities may be very wise. Ludwig Wittgenstein says there are remarks that sow and remarks that reap. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the face is the soul of the body. Ludwig Wittgenstein says that nothing will serve just as well as something about which nothing could be said. Yeah, there's some things we don't have words for, so silence is their only access, really. It's the only way to access. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. That's the end of the quote tunnel. A species that entered the timeless is a suggestion that in the future the human intelligence is going to have an energetic acknowledgement of its presence that's going to surpass language where personality is programmed from. To become truly timeless means that we discovered a changeless position to our intelligence, and upon your experience with that, everything else is automated. I am telling you, the sages long ago would say there's two things you can do in life. You can trust life or you can distrust it. And in reality, to trust life means to be able to accept the unknown before it is revealed. It's like if people could love the unknown dimensions of life just like their own children, it's as if they are loving the unknown potential of how the world can happen. There's something incredible there. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and I hope this episode was interesting. Much blessings, and namaste.